Okay, the most known job that Congress has is like the legislative function, which is just passing laws. So that's the number one thing we think about when we think about Congress is its ability to pass laws. So this flow chart that you have in your guided notes packet just gives you a little overview of how a bill, which is a proposed law, becomes an actual law, right? So number one, a bill can only be introduced by an actual member of Congress. So it doesn't really matter where the bill is introduced first, but it's ultimately going to have to go through the House and the Senate. So we're going to have it, just for our sake, be introduced in the House of Representatives. And we'll just say that Madeline Dean, our representative, is introducing the proposed idea. So the idea is called a bill. So her proposed idea is that she wants every American to get 4 years of free college paid for by American taxpayers, right? Kind of a controversial idea, but that's the idea. So she's going to have a colleague in the Senate, right? In this case, we'll just say John Fetterman, that's willing to introduce her bill there as well. So in order for a bill to become a law, it's going to have to go through both houses of Congress. So reps have to be able to work with senators, and senators have to be able to work with reps. So we're going to say that because Madeline Dean and John Fetterman are both from Pennsylvania, and they're both in the same party, they're Democrats, that Fetterman is going to be willing to introduce her bill, right? That every American gets 4 years of college in the Senate as well. All right. So the first thing that happens is when a bill is proposed, it's referred to the most relevant committee. So one of the other videos that you were supposed to watch talks about like the committee system in Congress and how that each member of the House and the Senate is kind of divided up into small groups. This just prevents all 435 members of the House of Reps from having to debate Representative Dean's bill, right? And then all 100 senators in the Senate from having to debate this bill too. It allows the group that's most relevant to kind of consider it. So in this particular case, the House committees, it's education and the workforce. This is a committee made up of, over 10 representatives that would basically consider Madeline Dean's bill, and they can do a couple things with it. They can make changes to her bill once she proposes it, like she loses control of it. And they have to decide to allow the bill to move beyond them. So, like, they're kind of like the screeners. Most times, the committees just kill the proposed idea. That's called pigeonholing a bill. So, like, that's what most likely happens. Most bills never make it out of committee, but the committee gets to see it first and they can make changes to it. The same thing is going to happen on the Senate side. The bill is going to go to the most relevant Senate committee. And in this particular case, the Senate committee is Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Again, it's a dozen plus senators that would basically get to review the bill first, possibly make changes to it, or also kill the bill there. So what we're going to say is, for the sake of this bill, is that the Education Committee in the House of Reps that gets to see the bill first, they're going to recommend that instead of 4 years, it's knocked down to 3 years of free college. And we're going to say, just for the sake of argument, that the Senate Education Committee reviews the same bill, but they make some different recommendations. They would only like it to be a year. So now we have a problem because Madeline Dean's bill that was originally proposed has now had different changes made to it by the committee that got to review it in the House of Reps and then the committee that got to review it in the Senate. So this is what then, if this is the rare bill on both sides now, if the Education Committee in the House actually makes some changes but then recommends it moves forward, then the bill is pushed out of committee and then the entire House of Reps gets to vote on it. On the House side, they'll be voting on should every American get 3 years of college. Same thing has to happen on the Senate side. Most bills are going to be killed in committee, pigeonholed, but this is going to be recommended to move forward, but with the change of it only being 1 year. And now basically what has to happen is the House is voting on 3 years and the Senate's voting on 1 free year of college. So let's say in both cases, it's approved. 3 years on the House side, 1 year on the Senate side. Now the confusing thing is, because they've basically each approved a different version of the bill, they have to basically send reps and senators to meet together on what's called a conference committee. This is the only committee made up of both representatives and senators, and they have to work out an agreement because we have 3 on one side and 1 on the other, and they have to be able to eventually vote on the same bill. So we're going to say that this conference committee made up of reps and senators agrees now that like 2 years is the best option. So now it has to go back to the House to vote. They're voting on 2 years of free college for every American. and it also now has to happen on the Senate side as well, right? So basically, this is where the senators vote and the House votes as well. And then at that point, I should mention on the Senate side, this is where a senator could filibuster and kind of ruin the whole thing, right? So it shows you how much power one individual senator has. We talked about the filibuster in class. But now what we're going to say is there's no filibuster on the Senate side. The House votes and approves 2 years, and then the Senate votes and approves 2 years. And now it goes to the president's desk. The president has two options. He can either sign the bill and it becomes law, or he could veto it. If you veto it, it goes back through the process, and Congress can pass the law over a president's veto with a 2/3 vote. So, in order for like this step right here, for them to vote the first time, just 51%, a majority of Congress has to agree. But if the president then vetoes it, and it doesn't go into effect, Congress can still pass it over his veto with a 2/3 vote, right? So this is the process of how a bill becomes a law. It's very difficult. The odds are stacked against any proposed bill becoming a law, but this is the kind of confusing process of how this happens.